The first time I heard her scream, it echoed across the whole street. Neighbors froze. Blinds snapped shut. Even the kids went silent. She wasn't just angry. She was furious, like her entire world was falling apart, and it was all because of me, because I moved into the one house she could never control. What happened next would turn this quiet street into a war zone. Welcome to the HOA Society, where we bring you the wildest, the strangest, and the most unbelievable HOA stories from across suburbia. I'm Daniel, a single guy who just bought his first home in a small suburban neighborhood outside Dallas. I work in IT by day and thought moving here would finally bring me peace and quiet. But instead, I found myself trapped in a battle I never asked for, because the woman next door, the self-proclaimed queen of the HOA, had just discovered something that drove her insane. My house was outside her HOA's reach. The first week in my new house felt like freedom. I could finally breathe. No landlord watching me, no HOA telling me what color my door should be. Just me, my truck in the driveway, and the little garden I always wanted to plant. But freedom, it has a way of attracting attention, especially from the people who hate it most. Every morning, I noticed her, Karen, standing on her porch like a guard at a prison gate. She never waved, never smiled. She just stared. Her eyes would follow me when I carried groceries, when I watered the yard, even when I walked my dog, like I was trespassing on land that belonged to her. At first I ignored it. Neighbors told me she was the HOA president, that she ran the board like a dictator. Fines for leaving your trash can out too long. Violations for Christmas lights that stayed up past January, and people paid, because no one wanted the war with her. But me, I was the exception. My property wasn't in her HOA, and that fact burned her like fire. The first time she came over, I was unloading a shelf from my truck. She stormed across the grass in her sandals, clipboard in hand like always. "You can't park that here overnight," she snapped. I looked at her, calm, and said the words she wasn't ready for. "This house isn't in your HOA." The silence after that was heavy. Her lips trembled. Her grip on the clipboard tightened. She blinked hard like she couldn't believe it, like the universe had betrayed her. Finally she hissed, "We'll see about that." And she turned on her heel, marching back to her porch. That was the moment I knew. This wasn't going to be easy. The next day I planted sunflowers along my fence. It was something I had dreamed about, bright yellow flowers that reminded me of my grandmother's farm. But to Karen, they were a declaration of war. She stood across the street with her phone, snapping pictures, muttering to herself. The following morning I found a note taped to my front door. "Eyesore," written in red marker. Nothing else. I laughed at first, but laughter turned into unease when more notes appeared. "Tidy up or move out. You're ruining the street." Each one angrier than the last. Neighbors whispered about it. Some said they supported me. Others just looked down and avoided eye contact. No one wanted to be on her bad side. Then came the night I left my porch light on. A simple light, nothing fancy, just a warm glow over the steps. At 11 p.m. sharp, there was pounding at my door. I opened it to see her standing there, hair messy, eyes wild. "You can't leave that on all night," she hissed. I said it again, calm as before. "This house isn't in your HOA." Her face turned red. Her voice cracked. "Don't think you can do whatever you want. Rules are rules." But rules stop at my property line. And she hated that. From then on, things escalated fast. I caught her peeking through my windows at night. Her phone flash, light flickering as she snapped pictures. She called the city once, complaining about illegal structures in my yard. An inspector came, laughed when he saw it was just a bird feeder. But every time she failed, she came back stronger. The breaking point came when I had a few friends over. We were grilling burgers, music playing low, nothing crazy, but she called the police. Said we were disturbing the peace. 3 squad cars rolled up, lights flashing. We all froze. Burgers half cooked, drinks in hand. The officers stepped out, looked around, saw nothing wrong. Then Karen stormed out, screaming, "They can't live here. They can't move here without HOA approval." The officers looked at me, then at her. One of them sighed and said it plain, "Ma'am, this property is outside your HOA. You have no authority here." The silence that followed was almost beautiful. Neighbors came out with phones, recording, whispering. Her empire crumbled in that single sentence. And yet, that was only the beginning. Because when someone like Karen loses power, they don't walk away quietly. They get louder, nastier, desperate to claw it back. Even now, when I step outside, I see her curtains move. She's watching me, waiting for me to slip. And I know this war is far from over. The morning after the police left, the street was different. It felt like the balance of power had shifted. Neighbors looked at me with curiosity, almost respect. Some smiled. Some even waved for the first time. And Karen, she didn't come outside. For a moment, I thought maybe it was over. Maybe she had finally realized. She couldn't touch me. But people like Karen, they don't surrender. They regroup. They plan. They wait. On the third day, I heard the sound of a hammer. I walked outside, and there she was, pounding a wooden sign into the grass at the edge of my driveway. It read in bold black letters, "Community standards apply to all residents." She looked at me with that fake smile. "This is just a reminder," she said. Her voice was sweet, but her eyes were sharp like knives. I could have pulled the sign out, snapped it in half, but I didn't. I wanted to see how far she'd go. Later that night, my friend Jake stopped by. He shook his head when he saw the sign. "She's not gonna stop, man. She's obsessed." I laughed, but deep down, I felt the weight of his words, because obsession can turn dangerous. The next week, I got a letter in the mail, not from her HOA, not from the city, but from an attorney. It was thick, full of printed pages, a petition demanding that I voluntarily join the HOA for harmony in the neighborhood. Of course, it had no legal power, but it was signed by Karen and by 6 other neighbors. That's when I realized she wasn't just fighting me alone anymore. She was recruiting an army. I didn't respond. Instead, I mowed my lawn in wide stripes just to make it look different than theirs. I parked my truck sideways in the driveway. I left my sunflowers untrimmed, tall and bright against the fence. Every small act was my quiet rebellion, and every small act drove her deeper into madness. One night, around 2 a.m., I heard a noise outside. I grabbed a flashlight, stepped onto the porch, and froze. Karen was in my yard, scissors in hand. She was cutting down my sunflowers, one by one. Her hair was wild, her breath heavy. I shouted. She jumped, dropped the scissors, and ran back across the lawn. By the time I called the police, she was hiding behind her curtains again. The officer came, took notes, shrugged. "No damage report worth filing," he said. I felt helpless, but also more determined than ever. If she wanted war, I would give her war. The next morning, I planted twice as many sunflowers, and this time, I put a camera above them. The footage went viral in the neighborhood group chat. Karen, sneaking at night. Scissors glinting in the dark. Neighbors who once feared her now laughed at her. The queen of the HOA, reduced to a petty trespasser caught on tape. Her rage grew louder. She stopped ending to be polite. She shouted from her porch whenever I walked outside. "Disgrace! Trash! You don't belong here." Children heard her. Families heard her. But I never shouted back. Silence became my weapon. Because the quieter I was, the louder she screamed. And the louder she screamed, the more foolish she looked. Still, I knew silence wouldn't protect me forever, because her obsession was growing into something darker. One evening, I returned from work to find a dead fish on my doorstep. The smell was overwhelming, rotten and sour. No note, no message, but I knew where it came from. Karen's curtains twitched as I carried the fish away. That night, I couldn't sleep. Every creak of the house, every shadow outside the window, made my heart race. I wondered, how far was she willing to go? Would she slash my tires, break my windows, hurt my dog? The thought made my stomach twist. The next weekend, I invited a few neighbors over for a barbecue. I wanted to show them I wasn't the villain she painted me as. We laughed, ate ribs, kids played in the yard, but halfway through, Karen appeared. She walked right into my yard. No invitation, no shame. "You people are fools," she screamed. "You're encouraging him. You're destroying our neighborhood." Everyone went silent. She stood there trembling, her face red, her voice shaking. And then, for the first time, I fought back with words. I said calmly, "Karen, my property is not in your HOA, and it never will be." The cheers that followed surprised even me. My neighbors clapped. Some laughed out loud. Karen froze. Stunned. Her kingdom, her control, was slipping faster than she could hold it. She turned and stormed off, but not before yelling, "This isn't over. You'll regret this." That night, I sat on my porch with Jake. He leaned back in his chair, sipping a beer, watching her curtains twitch again. "You know what she's gonna do next, right?" he said. I nodded, but I didn't have an answer, because deep down, I knew the war was far from finished. Karen wasn't just angry. She was desperate, and desperate people do desperate things. After that night, I couldn't shake the feeling she was planning something bigger. Her rage had boiled over in front of the whole neighborhood, and now she was embarrassed, and embarrassment is fuel for people like her. The next morning, a new sign appeared in her yard, painted red letters on a white board. "No lawless neighbors." She planted it facing my house, like a flag in a battlefield. Every time I stepped outside, her eyes would dart from the window, watching, waiting, daring me to react. I didn't give her the satisfaction. Instead, I went about my life. I worked in the garage, mowed the lawn in zigzag patterns, painted my front door bright blue just because I could. Every act of freedom was gasoline on her fire. By the end of the week, she had gathered her soldiers again. 6 neighbors stood in her driveway one evening, all listening as she waved her clipboard and shouted. I couldn't hear every word, but I caught fragments. Standards, outsiders, protect our community. It sounded less like a meeting and more like a rally. Jake stopped by later that night. He leaned against my porch railing, looking uneasy. "Man, she's turning them against you. You gotta be careful." I shrugged, trying to look calm, but inside, I felt the pressure building. Then, the letters started coming, not just notes taped to my door, but typed pages slid under my mat, dropped in my mailbox, threats disguised as warnings. "Last chance to follow our rules. You are a danger to this community. The HOA will not tolerate rebellion." The more I ignored them, the angrier she became. Her voice echoed across the street almost every day now, sometimes at dawn, sometimes late at night, screams about trash cans, lawn ornaments, even the color of my curtains. She was unraveling, piece by piece, in front of everyone. But the worst was yet to come. One Friday evening, I pulled into my driveway and saw it, spray paint across my garage door, in sloppy red letters, "Get out." I froze. The air felt heavy, my chest tight. I looked around, but the street was quiet. Her curtains twitched again, just enough to confirm what I already knew. I called the police. They came, took pictures, asked me questions, but without proof, without catching her in the act. They couldn't do much. They promised to patrol the area, but we both knew she'd never get caught so easily that night. I couldn't sleep. I sat in the dark living room, lights off, staring out the window at her house. Every shadow looked like her, every sound, like her footsteps creeping closer. The war wasn't just outside anymore. It was in my head. The next morning, I made a decision. I wasn't going to run. I wasn't going to give her what she wanted. I was going to fight back, but not with violence, not with anger, with proof. I installed cameras on every corner of my house, motion lights that triggered with the smallest movement, signs that read, "Smile, you're on camera." If she wanted to play games, I was going to record every move she made, and it didn't take long. 2 nights later, at 3 a.m., the camera caught her creeping onto my porch. Her hair was wild, her robe dragging across the steps. She crouched low, pulling something from her pocket. A dead rat. She placed it right in front of my door and tiptoed back into the shadows. When I saw the footage, my stomach turned. It wasn't just petty anymore. It was sick, twisted. She wanted to scare me, to disgust me, maybe even to drive me out, but instead, It gave me the weapon I needed. I uploaded the video to the neighborhood group. No captions, no explanation. Just the raw footage of their HOA president sneaking across my porch with a rat in her hand. The explosion was immediate. Comments flooded in. Neighbors furious. Some in shock, some laughing. The queen of the HOA, exposed as the villain. Her reputation crumbled overnight. But with people like Karen, shame doesn't kill them, it feeds them. The next day, she stood in her yard, screaming at anyone who would listen. They faked it. They edited it. He's the criminal, not me. Her voice cracked. Her hands shook. But no one was listening anymore. For the first time, I felt like I had won. But victory is dangerous. It makes you lower your guard. And when I lowered mine, she struck harder a week later. I came home from work to find the police already there. 2 cars in my driveway. Officers standing by my porch. My stomach dropped as one of them approached. "Sir, we received multiple reports of suspicious activity at your house." I was confused, shocked, until he showed me the report. Anonymous calls claiming I was running an illegal business from my garage, that I had dangerous chemicals stored inside, that I was a threat to the neighborhood. Of course it wasn't true, but the calls were enough to trigger an investigation. They searched my garage, my backyard, even questioned me about my job. I felt humiliated, angry, violated. And as I looked across the street, I saw her, standing at her window, smirking that night. I sat on my porch again. Jake joined me, shaking his head. "She's not gonna stop. Not until she breaks you." I stayed silent, staring at her house. My fists clenched, because deep down, I knew he was right. But here's the thing. People like her, they always make one mistake. They always push one step too far. And when they do, I'll be ready. After the false police reports, I felt trapped, not just in my house, but in her game. Every knock on the door, every siren in the distance, made me wonder if she'd struck again. But here's the thing about fear. It only controls you if you let it, and I was done letting her win. I started documenting everything, every note on my door, every sign she planted, every outburst she screamed from across the street. My camera system was running day and night, capturing every second. If she wanted war, and fine. I'd give her a courtroom war, but Karen, she was getting desperate. One morning, I walked outside and saw her with 2 other neighbors. They were standing at the edge of my lawn, whispering, pointing at my house. When they noticed me, she shouted loud enough for the whole street, "This man is destroying our neighborhood. He must be stopped." I laughed, but inside, my chest tightened, because I could see it in her eyes. She wasn't just fighting anymore. She was losing her grip on reality. Later that week, another letter arrived, not in my mailbox this time, but slipped under my door. The handwriting was messy, rushed, angry. "Leave now or pay the price." No signature, no stamp, just pure threat. I sat there staring at the words, the silence of the house pressing down on me. This wasn't just petty anymore. It was dangerous, but instead of fear, something else grew inside me, resolve. I wasn't going anywhere that night. I turned on every light in my house. I sat by the window with a cup of coffee, and I waited. Hours passed. The street was quiet, until movement caught my eye. There she was again, creeping across her lawn in the shadows. She stopped at the edge of my driveway, holding something in her hands, a bag, heavy, swinging slightly. She crouched down, placed it near my trash bins, and scurried back to her porch. The next morning, I walked over and opened it. Rotten food, slimy, foul, crawling with maggots. She was dumping garbage on my property, and yet I smiled, because my cameras had caught everything. I uploaded the clip again to the neighborhood group. The reaction was instant. Neighbors were furious, embarrassed, ashamed that their so-called HOA president was acting like a criminal. Some even posted comments saying they were considering resigning from the HOA entirely. Her power, her reputation, was crumbling, but instead of stopping, she doubled down. The next night, my phone buzzed at 1 a.m. Motion detected. Backyard. I pulled up the camera feed, and my blood went cold. She was in my yard again. But this time, he wasn't alone. 2 men were with her, faces covered, flashlights in their hands. They walked around my property, pointing at my shed, my windows, whispering to each other. And then they left. I didn't sleep the rest of the night. By sunrise, I was on the phone with the police. I showed them the footage, demanded protection. They promised patrols, but I could hear the doubt in their voices because without proof of damage, their hands were tied. Still, I knew one thing. Karen wasn't just playing petty games anymore. She was escalating, dragging others into her madness. So I took it further too. I reached out to a lawyer, explained everything, showed him the footage. He leaned back in his chair, shook his head and said, "She's opened herself up to harassment, trespassing, even defamation. If you're ready, we can bury her in court." For the first time in months, I felt hope. But hope has a way of angering the desperate, because when word spread that I was lawyering up, Karen lost whatever mask she had left. One afternoon, as I was mowing the lawn, she stormed into my yard. Her face was red, her hands shaking, clipboard raised like a weapon. "You think you can beat me?" she screamed. "You think your cameras and lawyers will save you? This is my neighborhood. You don't belong here." Neighbors came out, phones in hand, recording again. I shut off the mower, stared at her calmly, and said the words that broke her. "This isn't your neighborhood, Karen. It never was." Her scream echoed down the street, raw and furious. And then she snapped. She threw the clipboard at my feet, stormed back to her house, and slammed the door so hard the windows rattled. For days after, the street was quiet. Her curtain stayed closed, her porch empty. It felt unnatural, like the calm before a storm. And then it came. On a rainy Thursday night, a loud bang shook my house. I rushed to the window and saw smoke red sing from my trash bins. Someone had set them on fire. I grabbed a hose, doused the flames, my heart pounding. The cameras caught everything again, a shadowy figure running back across the street. Her height, her build, her robe, it was her. This time, the police couldn't ignore it. Arson, trespassing, harassment. I handed them the footage and filed the report. They promised an investigation, promised charges. And for the first time, I knew the endgame was close. But here's what I can't stop thinking about. Why do people like her go so far? What makes someone so desperate for control that they'd risk everything just to ruin another person's peace? After the fire, everything changed. The police came with more officers this time. They looked at the footage, wrote notes, took my statement. When I saw the lead detective's face, I felt some relief. He said softly, "We have enough to pursue arson charges if we can link it to her." I nodded, feeling both scared and oddly calm, because finally, the law was on my side. Karen's curtains were closed for days. Her voice over the fence was gone. Her notes stopped appearing. Maybe she was hiding, or maybe she was planning her next move. Either way, the silence felt strange on a street that had known her loud voice for years. The detective called me to the station a week later. He led me into a small room with a bright lamp and a table. "Mr. Carter," he said, reading from a folder, "we will need you to testify if charges are filed." The words settled in my chest like a stone. I thought of all the nights I hadn't slept, the smell of the burned trash, the dead rat, the maggot bag. I thought of my neighbors who finally looked at me without fear. I said yes without thinking twice. A few days later, the HOA board sent out a notice, an emergency meeting, open to the whole street. They called it a community safety meeting. Of course, it was about me, about her, about the mess she had made. I went, not to gloat, but to face the people who had stood with her or stayed silent while she ruled. The meeting was crowded. People whispered as I walked in. Some offered small nods. Others looked away. Karen sat at the head of the table, pale and shaking. She looked like a queen who had lost her crown. When she saw me, she stood up, her voice small. "This is a mistake," she said. "You don't understand what he is doing to us." I waited until the murmurs quieted. Then I spoke. I told them everything. The notes, the rat, the scissors in the night, the arson. I showed the footage on my phone, raw and unedited. Faces around the table shifted, from doubt to shock to shame, one by one. People started to apologize to me for not standing up sooner. A woman near the back raised her hand, voice shaking. "I'm sorry. I didn't see clearly before," she said. Karen's face crumpled like paper. After the meeting, there was talk of removing her from the board. People who once feared her finally found courage, but the law moves slow, and anger moves fast. The detective told me to keep being careful, to keep cameras on, to stay off the front line when possible, and so I did. But I never stopped watching. Court dates were set. The prosecutor called it petty obsession turned criminal. Neighbors came as witnesses, some to support me, some to speak of the strange behavior they had seen for years. The judge listened. The lawyers talked in careful voices. Karen sat at the table with her hands folded. She looked small and tired. When the prosecutor played the footage of her with the rat, the courtroom went quiet. Even her supporters sat with mouths closed. She tried to speak in her defense. She said I was provoking her, that I had ruined the neighborhood with my bright door and my truck. Her voice cracked. And then the truth slipped out anyway. She said, "I just wanted things to be perfect." It sounded like an excuse, like a child caught in a lie. The judge looked at her hard. "There is no excuse for arson," he said plainly. He ordered a restraining order. He fined her, and he required counseling. Ling as part of her sentence. It was not the end of it, but it was a start. After the trial, the atmosphere on the street changed again. People came to my yard, some to thank me, some to ask how I was doing. Kids played near my fence without fear. My sunflowers grew tall and proud, like flags of victory. And Karen, she left for a while. No one knew where she went, only that she was gone from her porch and her emails stopped. For a while. I thought the storm had passed. I painted a small mural on the side of my garage, bright blue waves and a little sun. It felt like a promise to myself, a promise that I would not live in fear anymore. Neighbors stopped by with lemonade, with stories of how they too had felt small under her rule. We laughed about small things. We fixed a broken mailbox together. We trimmed hedges and complained about power bills. Life began to feel ordinary again, and ordinary felt good. But some ordinary things kept nagging at me, like the silence where she used to shout, like the empty porch chairs on her lawn. I wondered if she had truly learned anything, or if she simply waited, planning a return. Some wounds heal, some only hide under new skin. One night, months later, my phone lit up with a message in the neighborhood group. "Karen has filed a motion to reclaim her place on the board," it read. My stomach turned cold. I sat there staring at the screen, memories rushing back like a flood. I thought of the arson, the rat, the maggot bag, the letters, the false reports. I thought of how many people had been shaken by her power trip. I called Jake right away. "Can she come back?" I asked. He was quiet for a long time. Then he said, "Legally, maybe. But you know how people are. They can forgive. They can forget. And sometimes the loudest voice wins again." The meeting was set for a Sunday, the same gym where we had once argued about parking rules and lawn heights. When I walked in that day, it felt like I had been summoned to a duel. Karen stood at us, the podium, thinner, calmer, eyes rimmed with red. She spoke softly about healing and coming together. She wore a face like an apology, but the edges were sharp still. Neighbors sat in silence. Some looked at me, some looked at her. The vote was close. Some thought she deserved a second chance. Some thought the pain she caused deserved more time away. When the count came in, she had narrowly won. I felt something break inside me, a mix of anger and cold disbelief. How could people forget so fast? How could they hand power back to someone who had burned property and hurt people? But the rules of the street are odd. Sometimes fear is stronger than memory. People wanted normal, and they thought she could give it. I tried to speak up, to remind them of everything, but my voice sounded small in that room. In the weeks after, she rebuilt her presence slowly. She posted polite notes about community gardens and holiday lights. She smiled in videos and at HOA meetings, quiet and stitched together like a mask. I kept my cameras on. My lawyer called and said the restraining order still stood for me, but the street felt different again. A thin line of tension under everyday life. Some neighbors returned to their old habits. Some watched me with awkward smiles, and I felt more alone than I had when the war first began. Then one afternoon, as I was trimming the sunflowers, a little girl from down the street walked up. She held a crumpled drawing, a house with bright blue lines and big yellow flowers. "Mr. Carter," she said shyly, "my dad says you made our street safe." Her eyes were bright and honest, and for a second, the heaviness lifted. I smiled and hugged the drawing to my chest. Maybe I had not lost everything. When Karen returned to power, the street felt colder. Her smiles at meetings were rehearsed. Her handshakes stiff. People clapped for her like they were clapping for an old song they no longer liked, but still remembered. And me, I felt like a ghost in my own neighborhood. The restraining order still stood. She could not step on my lawn or speak to me directly, but rules never stopped her before, and I could feel her shadow creeping again. It started with whispers. 2 neighbors stopped talking to me as often. One even crossed the street when I waved. Rumors spread like weeds that my cameras were illegal, that my truck leaked oil, that my sunflowers attracted rats. I knew the source of those whispers. Even if she never said my name aloud, I kept my silence. Let the cameras roll. Let my lawyer keep watch. But silence is heavy, and heavy things break eventually. One night, near midnight, my phone buzzed. Motion detected. Front yard. I opened the feed and froze. A man in a hoodie was walking up my driveway. He placed something near my garage, then ran back toward Karen's side of the street. I waited until the lights were off, then went outside. On the ground was a small box, taped shut. I knelt down, my hands shaking. I peeled the tape back. Inside was a stack of photos, pictures of me, pictures of my house, pictures of me at the grocery store, at the park, walking my dog. Someone had been following me for weeks. I brought the box inside, locked every door, called the police. They came fast this time, looked at the pictures, promised to investigate, but I saw the doubt in their eyes again, without a face, without proof. It was only another piece of fear in my growing collection. I couldn't sleep. Every creak of the house felt like footsteps. Every car that slowed outside made my heart slam. I sat on the couch until sunrise. Watching the blinds across the street, I knew she was behind it. Even if I could never prove it, days passed. Weeks blurred together. Karen smiled at meetings. Her supporters spoke of healing and moving forward. But I saw her in the shadows, peeking through her curtains when no one else was looking, waiting for me to break. Then came the letter, delivered not by mail, but slipped under my door again. Block letters cut from magazine, say, pasted to the page like a ransom note. "Move out or you will be sorry." No name, no address, just threat. I took it to my lawyer. He shook his head. "She's pushing the edge of the restraining order," he said, "but without a direct link. The judge won't act." I left his office feeling both protected and exposed, like standing in armor with cracks too wide to hide. The next weekend, I tried to live normal again. Jake came over. We grilled burgers like old times, laughed about work and life for a few hours. It felt like the world was ordinary again. But then, the smell hit us. Rotten. Sour. Heavy. I followed it to the side of the house. Someone had dumped raw meat in my flower bed. Flies swarmed. The soil was stained. Jake looked at me wide-eyed. "This is getting sick, man. This is obsession." I cleaned it up with gloves and bleach, but the smell stayed in my nose for days. That night, I sat on my porch, staring at her house. Her lights were off, her curtains drawn, but I knew she was awake. I could almost feel her eyes on me, her breath in the dark air. I thought about moving, packing my things, selling the house, leaving the war behind. But then I thought of that little girl who gave me the drawing of sunflowers. Her words echoed, "You made our street safe." If I left, what message would that send? That bullies win? That fear decides where we live? No, I wasn't leaving. The detective called the next week. He had news. "We linked the arson to her fingerprints," he said. "She can't hide from this one." Charges were filed again. Stronger this time, neighbors whispered. But now their whispers were about her, not me. Some said she had finally lost her mind. Others said they saw her pacing at night, talking to herself. Court was set again, but before it came, something happened that no one expected. A storm rolled in one evening. Lightning cracked across the sky. The wind howled down the street like a wah. Arning. I was inside, watching the rain beat against the windows, when I heard shouting. I opened the door and saw her. Karen, standing in the storm, drenched, screaming at the sky. "You can't take it from me," she howled. Her voice was raw, breaking, desperate. Neighbors peeked out, filming again. She collapsed onto her lawn, sobbing, screaming my name into the thunder. Police arrived, wrapped her in a blanket, led her away. She didn't fight this time. She looked broken, small, like a candle burned down to its last ember. The next day the street was quiet again. Her house was dark, her porch empty. Some said she had been taken for psychiatric evaluation. Others said family had come to bring her away. No one knew for sure. But I knew this. Her war had taken everything from her. Her crown, her power, her reputation, and maybe even her mind. For weeks the neighborhood felt lighter. Kids played louder. Neighbors waved more freely. My sunflowers grew taller than ever. For the first time, I believed it was truly over. But late one night, as I was locking my front door, I found another envelope on the step. Inside, a single sheet of paper, 4 words in bold black ink: "I will be back." My heart sank. The shadows grew long again, because even broken queens sometimes return for their throne. When I found that note, "I will be back," my stomach turned cold. It had been weeks since I'd heard her name spoken aloud. Weeks of peace I almost believed was real, but those 4 words ripped it all away. I showed the note to the detective. He frowned, tapped his pen on the desk. "It could be her, or it could be someone trying to stir the fire," he said. But I knew better. The handwriting was different this time. Calm, deliberate, not the frantic scrawl of anger. This was a promise. Nights became restless again. Every sound outside felt like a signal. Every shadow stretched too long. Neighbors reassured me, said she was gone for good, that her family had taken her far away. But fear has a way of whispering louder than facts. And then, the whispers turned into reality. One afternoon, I came home from work and saw a car in her driveway, a car I didn't recognize. Silver, clean, tinted windows. The porch light was on for the first time in months. Curtains that had stayed shut for so long were open just a little, enough to see someone moving inside. By sunset, the rumors spread across the street like wildfire. "She's back," someone whispered. I stood on my porch, staring at the faint glow of her living room, and I knew the storm had returned. The next morning, she was there again, standing at the edge of her lawn, clipboard in hand, just like the first time I ever saw her. Her smile was back too, but thinner, more twisted. She raised her hand in a wave. I didn't wave back. Days passed. She didn't shout. She didn't dump garbage or leave notes. Instead, she acted polite. She baked cookies for a neighbor. She handed out flyers for a welcome back HOA meeting. She even stood in the middle of the street one evening, telling stories to kids like she was everyone's grandmother. But I saw the flicker in her eyes when she looked at me, cold, sharp, waiting. At the meeting, she spoke softly. She apologized to the community for her stress and bad judgment. She promised to make things right, promised peace. Some people nodded. Some even clapped. But others looked at me. Their eyes said what their mouths didn't. They remembered after the meeting. I walked home alone. I hadn't said a word the whole time. And yet, she followed me with her eyes until I shut my door. That night, another envelope slipped under my door. Inside, one line written in neat black ink: "Watch carefully. The next move is mine." I sat at the table staring at those words for a long time. Was it a threat, or just another game? Either way, it told me one thing. She wasn't finished, so I prepared. I upgraded my cameras, added locks to every window. I bought a safe for important papers, backup drives for my footage. I wasn't going to be caught off guard again. For weeks, nothing happened. She walked her lawn, smiled at neighbors, ran her HOA meetings like nothing had ever gone wrong. I started to wonder, maybe she really had changed. Maybe the note was just her way of keeping me afraid. But then, the breaking point came. It was a Saturday morning. The neighborhood was quiet, birds singing, kids riding bikes. I stepped outside to grab the mail, and froze. Paint splattered across my driveway in bright red letters, huge words dripping across the pavement. Get out now." Neighbors gathered, whispering, pointing. Some shook their heads. Some looked afraid. And then, she appeared. Karen walked out onto her porch, arms folded, smiling. She didn't say a word. She didn't need to. Her silence screamed louder than her notes ever had. This time, I didn't wait. I called the police, handed them the footage, demanded action. The detective sighed, but nodded. "This is enough. We'll take it to the judge." And that's how the final chapter began. Court was different this time. More people showed up. Neighbors who once hid in silence now stood beside me. One by one, they spoke about the years of fear, the petty fines, the threats, the harassment. The prosecutor played the footage again. The rat, the trash fire, the spray paint, the photos, and now the new graffiti, piece by piece. The story came together, a story of obsession, of control, of one woman's desperate need to rule. When it was her turn to speak, she broke. Her voice cracked. Tears streamed down her face. She said I had ruined her life, that I had embarrassed her, that I had destroyed her perfect neighborhood. Her words tumbled out like stones rolling downhill, but in the end, they didn't matter. The judge's voice was calm and final. "Ms. Whitaker, you are hereby removed from any leadership role in the HOA permanently. You are fined for damages, and you are forbidden from any contact with Mr. Carter or his pros. Purdy, violating this order will result in jail time." The gavel struck, and just like that, it was over. The queen had been dethroned for good. Neighbors clapped quietly. Some hugged me afterward. The little girl with the sunflower drawing smiled from her mother's arms. Jake slapped me on the back and whispered, "You did it, man. You finally did it." When I went home that night, the air felt different, lighter, calmer. I sat on my porch with the sunflowers swaying beside me, listening to the quiet for the first time since moving in. It really felt like home. But as I looked at her dark house across the street, I couldn't shake one thought. What happens to people like her when their power is stripped away? Do they fade quietly into the background? Or do they burn with anger forever, waiting for the moment to rise again? And that's the question I'll leave with you. If your worst enemy was finally defeated, stripped of their crown, their power, their voice, would you ever trust that it was truly over? Or would a part of you always keep watching the window at night, waiting for the shadow to return?